UFO enthusiasts, to our first Are UFOs Modcast. Are UFOs is a Reddit community that is currently the largest online forum dedicated to the topic of UFOs. The purpose of this podcast is to provide a general overview of the most popular conversations happening on the subreddit, which are voted up to the top by readers of the community. This perspective in ufology is unique. We don't choose what to talk about. You, our UFO readers, do. Each episode will go through the top 5 posts of the month and share what readers in the comment section say, without doxing, of course. My name is DoeDoeBear. I am hosting today's episode. I have been in the topic of Are UFOs, or I've been on the subreddit, rather, for about a year. I have been in the space of UFOs really my whole life, with my father being a MUFON expert when I was younger, and then kind of mainstream UFO light until recently when I became a moderator. I've enjoyed the topic since then and continue to dive in deep into the rabbit holes that are readily available to all of us.
I'm Stinger. I first got interested in UFOs in 2003 when I heard about Gary McKinnon because I am also a hacker with a cybersecurity background. I started reading the UFO subreddit probably around 2009, became a moderator in 2022. I love reading the subreddit on a daily basis and just keeping up with all of the latest news and developments.
I'm VCAmaster, and I've been on the sub for a handful of years, probably since about 2017. And I've been a moderator since maybe 2021. I'm not really sure, but just a bit longer. And I had a pretty close encounter with a UFO as a child. And then about 10 years later, as a young adult, I had another really close encounter with a UFO. So that means I have a perspective on UFOs being real, but I wouldn't necessarily call myself a believer or a skeptic. I'm just trying to figure out what UFOs are.
I'm DuelingGroks. I've been interested in UFOs since I was a young kid, and I've been reading the sub for about 5 years. I've been moderating for less than a year. I'm more interested in the existential questions and just the why are we here type information. And I like stabilizing videos and using my tech skills to try to just add something to the community.
Which you do a lot. Thank you so much. We appreciate your help too here with the podcast. Like I said, we're working towards making this be about the top 5 posts of the month. And in spooky October month, we had some really great posts. We'll start off with prolonged sighting outside Langley Air Force Base over Chesapeake Bay. Curious to hear what your thoughts are with the posts and the sighting, the fact that it's near the Air Force, and why this post gained so much attention.
So I think the context is that there have been sightings over Langley, and there have been drone sightings. The Wall Street Journal did an article on what they frame as, drones, but essentially UAPs near Langley Air Force Base, which the current policy is that they cannot shoot them down with kinetic weapons. They can try and use jammers and stuff like that, but essentially because of these UAP incursions, they ended up relocating the fighter wing. And there have been documents that have been FOIA'd about the sightings over Langley. Like I said, the Wall Street Journal did an article on it. So I think that all of this, that's the context behind the Langley video and probably why it caught so much traction. This video in particular, I feel like the investigation has been pretty conclusive. The original poster describes seeing the lights rise up in the air at an angle and then come back down. And there's a user, Greek Geek, says it's just an LED kite that a local named Kite Man flies. And then some people went deep on that to find out who this Langley Kite Man is. He was identified as someone named R.J. Olms, who posts videos on Facebook of himself flying these these LED kites. There's even one post where he's like, aliens over Messick, hashtag night flying kites, or hashtag kite night flying or something like that. So I think it's clear that at least for that particular video, it's probably a kite. But in the context of the larger conversation about UAP incursions over Langley and other Air Force bases, I think that's, especially to the point where it's getting national security attention, I think that's probably the more interesting aspect of this conversation.
Yeah. Sorry, my dog is going nuts on me right now.
Oh, what a sweet baby.
Yeah, I thought it was unfortunate that, and there were a bunch of comments that said this looks like a kite. You know, there was like a good number, and they all got downvoted like crazy. Which, you know, I guess people just want to make up their minds and believe what they want to believe. But it's unfortunate that there didn't seem to be any good investigation on our sub into it. And I was doing a deep dive into it. You know, I started making a video about it, and you know, I thought I'm going to stop making this video because someone is going to identify the kite flyer. And sure enough, the next day, the kite flyer was identified. So fortunately, I didn't waste too much time on it. But
yeah, apparently. So we also we pinned or Useful Reply, who is another moderator sub. He pinned a comment to this specifically stating it's likely identified as being the kind Stinger stated, and OP apparently even got confirmation from the individual that it was him flying the kite that night. But OP did not state that.
I was just saying the impetus for you making the video was you didn't see anyone doing a deep dive at that moment. So you started diving, and by the time you were done, the sub ended up finding it. Is that correct?
Yeah, more or less. I analyzed the first video that he posted on Reddit pretty thoroughly. Looked like a kite to me. I showed a bunch of reasoning. And then once I was done, I realized that he had uploaded another 3 videos that made it even more obvious that it was a kite. So I was going to edit those in as well, but over the next day, it had already been positively identified by Op himself. So, you know.
Mm-hmm. Which I think is great. It says a lot about our readers. You know, we have a lot of people that are as passionate as we are that on top of it. So it's nice to see that.
I will say that, you know, it's notable, I think, that the people who solved it did not do it actively on our site. They did it somewhere else where maybe they felt a little bit more welcome to be a skeptical, you know, investigator, and then reported back to our sub with the findings.
Which I find sad because I think that our subreddit does, you know, tend to lean skeptic and believer, and I think that everyone should feel welcome.
Yeah.
Regardless.
Well, and you know, what unites skeptics and believers is a search for truth. We're all just trying to get to the bottom of this and figure out what the truth is, wherever that leads. You know, so you know, maybe people have you know, but I try to highlight what we have more in common than what we have different.
That's a good way of looking at it. I love that.
Well, I have a tendency of being more gullible, so I'll be really fascinated with something, and that's why I'll stabilize it, you know. And even then, it's really hard for me ever to form an actual opinion. Everything always ends up unknown. It's just to which degree of unknown it is. And there are definitive prosaic explanations out there, but the ones that are the more anomalous, I always find I don't trust my own gut sometimes, if that makes sense.
Well, we also have another post. Afghanistan Jellyfish UAP. Alleged photos of the Jellyfish AP have surfaced in X and YouTube, according to this post. They're said to show the well-known Jellyfish UFO filmed in Afghanistan and released by Jeremy Corbell. And these pictures are pretty wild. So alleged photos of the jellyfish AP have surfaced on X and YouTube. Players had to show the well-known jellyfish UFO filmed in Afghanistan, released by Jeremy Corbell. I'm curious to know what you guys think. I personally have seen weather balloons up close and them being made in factories. It's part of my job, and it doesn't look like anything that I've seen for weather balloons or surveillance balloons or anything like that. Curious what y'all think about this post.
Well, the first thing I want to point out is that Jeremy Corbell's video was shot in Iraq, not Afghanistan. OP kind of had a bit of a misleading title there. Again, in the comments, I want to highlight user Alt Keyblade, who found the original source of the video as a YouTube video. Supposedly, someone with the name of Ghost
And I want to thank Ghost
sent in this video. And if you look at the original, it's just a screenshot. We never see an actual video of it, but it looks like it's a screenshot that's made to look like a video. There's a couple things to notice. One is the file name contains the word classified, and we had a couple users, Dorkamundo, Smug Jerry, Amigo Burrito, Roxer Smash, talk about, some of them had a top secret clearance and worked with classified information, and basically said that having classified in the file name doesn't make sense. They said it wouldn't be in the file name, and it wouldn't be the word classified. It would say the specific classification level, whether it's confidential, secret, or top secret. Especially in the age of AI generated material, I think that this is questionable. But also, I think the provenance is important. What kind of sealed the deal for me is looking at the YouTube video's description. The user specifically says that they work with channels like Secure Team 10 and Third Phase of Moon. Both of those channels have been known hoaxers going back years and years. I actually wrote up something for the RUFOs wiki on ufos.wiki about the people behind those channels, and gave some sources of videos that they're known to have hoaxed. So to people who are newer to the UFO community, sometimes they see a Secure Team 10 channel or a Third Phase of Moon video, and they're like, oh, this is, and they repost it, and it's like, well, actually, this was debunked a long time ago. But
it's a great point to bring up. If I could just highlight our UFOs wiki for a second. We have an amazing wiki that was developed by the team and continues to grow, that we encourage all of our readers to check out prior to posting any sighting posts. You might find that something that you've looked at in the sky could be easily debunked through a multitude of different tools and resources that we have provided there in our wiki. And information there is absolutely valuable. And as Stinger and Let's Talk UFOs, they've set that up and really built upon it. Just want to highlight that there. It's available to everybody.
just on the note of the wiki, ufos.wiki also has reporting links for people who want to report a sighting to a reporting organization like New Fork or MUFON. We have those links on ufos.wiki as well.
Stinger, what was the word that you used? Because you said chain of I'm familiar with chain of custody, but provenance?
Provenance. Yeah, provenance is a really important thing when you're working with UFO evidence, whether it's physical evidence or a photo. Chain of custody. It's similar to chain of custody, but provenance. Where did it come from? Jeremy Corbell's video had vetted provenance. It was known to come from a military source. This video is kind of more of a trust me, bro kind of situation.
Yeah, there's no provenance at all on this post. Op only says that alleged photos of Jellyfish AP have surfaced on X and YouTube. No links, nothing specific. He's relying on other users, I suppose, like Alt Keyblade to find the actual sources, which, that's a huge pet peeve of mine. I think not providing your sources is a good tip off that something's wrong with the post. And maybe in the future, we can make it so that people actually have to show where they're getting their information from, because what's the point in posting something without showing where you got it from?
Very true. Very true.
makes investigation more difficult and puts the onus on the reader as opposed to the person op or op.
Yeah, I like to use OP. I'm curious. OP. What's
I'm
the
gonna
correct
adopt op now.
nomenclature?
VCA.
VCA, you seem more legit when you say it, so I guess I'm gonna go with op. But our
I
Well,
next,
like
I guess in our
OP.
context it's confusing because op is like an operation, so maybe op
yeah,
isn't good. We
Yeah,
should say
OP.
OP.
OP is what
Yeah, I'm
I
down with
usually
OP.
say. You're down with OP. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Uh, all right. So the next post that we have here, which I find very interesting, Pentagon is illegally hiding secret UFO program from Congress. Whistleblowers allege. In my opinion, nothing new, but curious what y'all think.
Nothing new. Oh, this was the story of the month for me. Of course, this is Michael Schellenberger's groundbreaking article on Immaculate Constellation. A few highlights for me. The specific cases that are mentioned that I hadn't heard about previously, the 6 objects around a fighter, one of them tracking with it as it makes maneuvers and rolls to try and get away from it. It's just the object's just tracking with it the whole time, to the point where the fighter left its operation area, worrying that that this was an incursion of some kind. And the other case where this glowing sun-like sphere appeared above a Navy vessel, strangely didn't illuminate the deck, even though it was clearly glowing. And then afterwards, the people on the deck reported as if they'd been in a trance or something like that. Yeah, so those 2 cases were mentioned in the Schellenberger article that I had never heard of before. So I'm definitely interested to learn more about those military encounters, in the same way as we know so much about the Tic Tac and gimbal videos. I don't know if there's going to be videos of those encounters, but just the more corroboration we get about these military encounters is fascinating to me. And then the name of the program itself, Immaculate Constellation.
So weird.
Yeah, being like a scoop up program to like try and intercept all of the videos of UAPs before they get anywhere, and to scoop up materials, and two, just kind of this like dragnet of getting all the UAP information and kind of catching it. Also, one thing that I am curious about is so it's described as an umbrella program with other programs underneath it, but it's also described as having started only in 2017 after the New York Times article. I'm curious about the structure and the timeline, because if it's a new program, can it be or can it contain the so-called legacy programs, or not? Is this something that is new and parallel to those, or were they reorganized under it? I don't know, and I'm hoping that we find more about it in the upcoming congressional hearings, and I'm hoping that we find more about it from the sources involved that gave their information to Schellenberger.
I think there's been mention of someone mentioned that we might hear more about this at the November 13th hearing. Was I mistaken? I thought I was on UFO Twitter and I saw a couple of mentions, but I didn't know if anyone had else heard anything, because I think this might be a whistleblower in the 13th, the person that came forward to Michael Schellenberger, or am I mistaken?
We'll find out. Maybe by the time this podcast comes out, won't have long to wait, or maybe we'll already know.
I thought the note about the bright UAP not actually illuminating the nearby area or objects is interesting, because you do hear that in a variety of UFO cases, UAP cases. Even my own adult UFO encounter had very bright lights, but it did not seem to actually light anything up. And I've read it several times before. And as in terms of it, the timeline, I do find it interesting. It does seem to be maybe just a parallel program, maybe just obfuscation, because there's, I would have to imagine that the deep programs, the program has been ongoing, probably does not intersect with this program. Um, I think it's going to remain hidden to a degree, unless there's something that actually comes to light that links the two directly. I think it's going to be an uphill battle to actually get to the program itself.
I think we need to keep in mind that like the UFO movement's grown so much since 2017, and the amount that I imagine that the actual Black program that exists that handles all of this, the amount of energy and resources and time that they're trying to, implement disinformation for is going to increase as well. I do think that this though is pretty substantial, and I'm curious to see how that's going to play out in the hearing on November 13th. So, and I apologize when I said nothing new. I guess it was more in response to the title of the post. Obviously, the UFO program being hidden is nothing new to the UFO community. There's always been program. I think it's been ongoing. It's just the name changes, the people might change, the organizations in which it handle it might change, or there might be ongoing ones that are running in congruence with each other. But yeah.
I do want to bring up that Carl Nell during this wasn't the SALT conference, this was the Soul Foundation's. He said something that always stood out to me. He said that the Gang of Eight are aware of all of the information. How he phrased that, I think people that also watch the same thing might disagree with me. But for me, he said, and they have all the information, and he paused and kind of looked around. And so I thought that was interesting because I like Carl Nell. So when they say that they're hiding it, they're mostly talking about the Gang of Eight, who was set up initially to kind of stop some of this underground stuff, right? So that's what the secure access programs are actually being disclosed to that Gang of Eight. So that's something that always pops into my head when I read this title, is that it's kind of in conflict.
I think you have to wonder what Carl knows.
In the audience that he was speaking to at that conference, y'all realize we're more business private sector.
Well, no, Soul Foundation is largely academics. I'm actually kind of excited. I was invited to attend this month. Yeah, well,
he was speaking
you're thinking of
SALT
conference. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a private sector conference, but the Soul conference is different. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so in the Soul Foundation, or in the Soul Sun one, he said the Gang of Eight are aware of all of the information, or the information, and he paused. That's what I was kind of alluding to. So I always find that interesting. Like, what does Carl know, like you guys say?
Yeah.
I'm curious what the Gang of Eight knows.
Well, and we'll get to this with post number 1 as well. We'll definitely circle back on Carl Nell.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it says that he thinks the Gang of Eight knows as much as he does, but does he know all the information? I think there are levels of compartmentalization that are difficult to tell where it stops.
Going on to the next post, image released of mysterious object shut down over Yukon in 2023. This is a picture that had been obtained by CTVnews.ca Canada. Canadian Freedom of Information Lithuanian image appears to be a photocopy of an email printout. Heavily redacted documents show how the image was approved for public distribution within days of the headline-grabbing incident, then held back after a public affairs official expressed concern that releasing it may, quote, create more questions and confusion. What do y'all think?
Cool photo. I thought it was interesting that Green Street for a bit was trying to debunk it, just showing like pictures of weather balloons from below with part of the weather balloon being blocked off by a payload, and goes, is that what we're looking at? And I'm like, no, I don't think so, but good try.
I feel like if they had certainty that it was a balloon, that they would have said so. Like also, I do want to highlight that the balloon incidents of 2023 mark the sharpest uptick in the growth of readers on our subreddit to that point. that was when the curve went from this to like this, and then David Grush happened, and it just went further up. And there's definitely a lot of interest, and it was all in the wake of the Chinese balloons. So just to talk about the balloon incidents more largely, there's the Chinese spy balloon that gets tracked and shot down, and everybody's reading about that. And then there's 3 other things that get shot down. One over the Great Lakes, one over the Yukon, and one over Alaska. These were all basically detected because NORAD changed their tuning parameters. Basically, they've been looking for intercontinental ballistic missiles, so they've only been looking for fast-moving things, jets and missiles the whole time. And they changed their parameters so that they were again looking for slow-moving things, and suddenly they see these other objects, balloons or what have you. There's been a lot of discussion and debate about what these objects were. Was it an amateur radio balloon? Was it a fishing tent? Which one was what? And it's still unknown. And I feel like if the people perpetuating the cover-up had a good explanation that they could come up with that would just sweep away doubt, they would come forward with it, wouldn't they? That's just kind of my thought.
Yeah. And they specifically said at one point, in a press conference, we're calling it an object because that describes it best. They did not call it a weather balloon.
There were some videos actually that came out at the time. There's an individual in Langley who posted a video of just going by. And I remember
the guy on the ground.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, his videos got removed from YouTube. I don't know if he deleted them or what, but that was extremely interesting evidence that I feel like kind of got memory hold. His videos disappeared. People stopped talking about it. And I do think this is overall a very interesting series of events that could have ongoing, investigation.
Agreed.
Well, isn't it also the case that during the 2004 Nimitz case, they started seeing these things on their radar because they too upgraded their radar? And is the time that this happened, was the time of the Chinese spy balloon, then they adjusted our radar? Because I thought we witnessed the balloon by eye first, or am I mistaken?
No, you could be right about that. That's a good
Sounds
point.
Right. It was by eye first.
Yeah, that sounds correct to me. And this reminds me of a engineer guest who was recently on the Good Trouble Show podcast who was he was pitching basically reverse radar, essentially, passive radar, having, thousands of people over the country get a radar system that basically listens for reflections from commercial radio off of objects and then networks them together to analyze flying objects. And he mentioned how, along the same lines of updating how the radar works, you have to fine-tune the parameters of the radar for a specific range of speed. Because if it goes above or below that range, it starts to alias, meaning it becomes noise, essentially. If you're looking for stuff that flies like a plane, stuff that flies faster than the plane or slower than the plane will look kind of like noise and will be ignored. So, UFOs are known to hover or go really, really, really fast. So they're outside the range of a plane typically. So it makes sense why we're not seeing them.
Yeah, that person's name is Mitch Randall. And I just want to plug Mitch Randall and his Project Skywatch passive radar project. I'm a big fan and will be following it with great interest. I met Mitch at Contact in the Desert. Really, really great guy.
Yeah, awesome. I want one.
Contact in the Desert is a great conference. I highly recommend going to attend the next one as well. All right, so going into the last post we have. In his first public appearance since May, Nell reiterates his assertion that the non-human intelligence phenomena is real and has had a long-standing interaction with humanity. I enjoyed seeing Carl Nell again. I think we mentioned previously that, you know, I personally love his expertise, his background. He's one of the most prolific individuals currently speaking on the subject, in my opinion. Given his credentials, I am closely watching what he has to say, but curious what y'all think.
He's in a position to know, is what I think. And he was David Grush's boss at one point. And just his portfolio of where he's worked and the degrees that he has makes me look up to him. If he wasn't even involved in this subject, he'd be someone I would listen to just because of his expertise.
I've read his essays about Afghanistan and 9/11. She was heavily involved in the operations that took place there and what we could do better. His analytical mindset when it comes to battleground and military operations is fascinating. So I trust his word when he, starts talking about this subject with such vigor and such certainty, given how respected and well sought after his advice was prior to this as well.
His words are definitely well thought out. He's kind of calculated and stays on script. I mean, what he said on Disclosure Day was almost identical to what he said at the SALT conference. And the only time, and gosh, our astute researchers fucking picked up on this. The only time he broke script was when he looked kind of straight at the camera and goes, "I know this personally." So what does that mean? What is that? People on UFO Twitter were like, "He's a firsthand witness," and maybe he is. I don't know. Maybe he'll testify. I definitely am also following Carl Nell with close interest.
He will be doing an interview with Diana Pazolka soon.
This is for Diana Pasulka's Beyond the Stars course that she teaches. She brings on all sorts of guests. She brought on Tim Galladay. She brings on all sorts, because she's so well networked, and brings on all these people who she's known about.
I do wish he hadn't mentioned Hillier. But what are you gonna do? That people really took upon that as, oh, he's repeating other people who only have third-hand evidence. So, it was kind of a weak point in his talk. I think it would have been that much stronger if he had not mentioned him. But
because Paul Hellyer heard from someone else, that's how he has his information. But when I researched Paul Hellyer, he was also talking in front of some type of group of people, and he had a statement as if it was written from the non-human intelligence, which was really interesting. So, I haven't done the time to investigate where his sources are from, but I found it out of place amongst the other mentions that Carl Nell did.
Right, exactly.
For those that might not know Paul Hellyer, can you kind of give a brief background on why?
Yeah, I'll Paul Hellyer, the late Paul Hellyer, has passed away. Is an ex-Minister of Defense from Canada, and for a long time he was the highest-ranking official to have public support for UFOs. The hole in Hellyer's situation comes because he was not interested in UFOs while he was defense minister. He became interested in UFOs afterward. And he, he read books and kind of, he kind of went whole bore into just believing people in ufology. The counterpoint to him, basically just being a fan, is that he went to some of his military contacts from his time as defense minister and asked them, is this true? And we don't know what happened in those conversations. We can't ask Hellyer anymore, but he may have had some of that information validated by contacts that he had from his time in defense.
And Hayam Ished, who held in Israel's Space Force, if I'm not mistaken, he's like 84. He came out with one of the Israeli newspapers, and I think that is there a book that he wrote? I was trying to translate it at one point because I couldn't find an English copy.
Yeah, he made some pretty wild claims apparently in a book that he wrote, which people also took upon to be like, this is a little too far out for me. But, again, he was leading the Space Force of Israel, essentially. So
I also want to use this to bring up that people sometimes try to claim that UFOs are a uniquely American phenomenon and they only happen in the United States. That's simply not true. They're a global phenomenon. People ask about, why aren't other countries opening up their files? Other countries have.
And are continuing to do so.
Yeah.
Japan, for instance, is in the process.
Japan, Brazil, France,
Mexico, as we know.
Mexico. So, and another thing is, so a lot of times people will look at an infographic of where UFO sightings are, and almost always these are infographics pulled from Newfork. Well, Newfork is the North American UFO Reporting Center, or the National UFO Reporting Center. So it's specifically a United States entity, and it's English speaking. So, the fact that it's more just a bias in the reporting data, because the people collecting reports, MUFON, Newfork, these organizations, they're English speaking and they're in English speaking countries, and they're the ones collecting and publishing the data. So when some infographics person puts together a sightings map, it looks like they just happen in the United States and in England and Europe and stuff, but that's just because we don't have the data from the other places, and they do happen everywhere else. There's just we don't have as much data from those other countries.
There's zero doubt.
Zero doubt.
There is zero doubt. And then like Stinger just said, I know this personally. For me, that's something that made me smile. Like when I saw that during National Disclosure Day, which was set up, right? Because that was 300 days after the National Defense Authorization Act that was signed in like December of 2023. They had 300 days to issue out everything to the archives. And of course, what was it, 4 days or 5 days prior to that due date, which Daniel Sheehan said would probably happen, they're like, no, we're going to wait another 300 some odd days to actually
bureaucracy,
do that.
Government bureaucracy, I'll tell you what.
But it was worth it to hear, I know that personally. That made me smile.
I just loved Carl and Nell's statement. If I could, I replayed it at Contact in the Desert while we were on the Airbnb, over and over and over. I replayed it for all my family and friends, trying to understand UFOs. I'm like, look, here's him explaining his credentials. And then he says, with zero doubt, and he does this stare as after he says it, zero doubt. And he looks at everybody. And you're just like, oh my gosh, okay, well, this very well credentialed man who seems sane, who does not seem like, he's lost his mind, who still is in a position of power, by the way. He oversees the U.S. Army Reserve for Africa, I believe now.
Army Futures Command, yeah.
Army's Futures Command, thank you so much. He oversees he's still in a position of power. So this is essentially disclosure again. I don't think people realize how many times. Yeah, we've had people come out. Tim Gallaudet also being somebody of renown that has come out, and I find it so fascinating. And speaking of global disclosure day, I don't know if we want to move on from this post and kind of move on to kind of what our favorite posts are from this month.
There was one last note I had on this when you guys were talking about maybe he'd be one of the people, in the hearing, one of the whistleblowers or whatever. It reminds me of a more recent interview with Colm Kelleher and James Lukatsky, where they were asked, would you be a whistleblower if you were, and they were like, no, we have NDAs, we're not doing it. And they were asked if you were compelled to, by a, what's it called? If you were brought
Subpoena?
in for
Like a subpoena?
a subpoena, if you're compelled to by subpoena, would you? And they said, well, it depends on the language of the subpoena, but no. We have NDAs. We also have agreements with private corporations. You would have
Mm-hmm.
to ensure that we would not be violating any of that. And then, you could drag me in. Sure. So it kind of, it made me think about people like Nell. He probably feels the same way. He probably doesn't feel protected by the whistleblower protections that have been outlined. They probably aren't strong enough for a lot of these people.
I think we underestimate how much the private sector has control over this.
Yeah.
And how much their contracts with government agencies have control over this. The government gets a lot of money and a lot of services from the private sector. I personally work with contracts with the government sometimes in cybersecurity. And I've seen and heard, not anything to do with UFOs by any means. It's all, there's much more, the private sector has a lot more money and a lot more say in this than the government does. So the pressure that we're putting on to the government to disclose, I think we need to kind of redirect or maybe direct the pressure for disclosure to be on the private sector as well, with, people like North Grumman and is that the name of it?
Northrop
And
Grumman?
Northrop Grumman, yeah.
Lockheed Martin,
Lockheed Martin,
Raytheon.
Raytheon. I'd say
Boeing.
Boeing also. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I saw a lot of Boeing protests happening this week when I went to the Pacific Northwest. There's a lot of strikes happening with Boeing. I wish that some whistleblowers would come out.
I really like what you said about putting the pressure on the private corporations.
That's why I think Carl Nell spoke at the SALT conference the way he did. And that was a filled room. And that wasn't the first time that was disclosed. The same interviewer talked to Gary, oh my gosh.
Nolan.
Nolan also was at the SALT conference a year prior, but it was not many people were in that room.
So non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing. And there are unelected people in the government that are aware of that.
All right. Well, thanks so much. So I think that with that, we'll move on to our bonus section, which includes our favorite posts of this month. We'll go ahead and start with VCA. Why not?
Okay, I wasn't prepared for this, but I do have a favorite post. Just posted yesterday, I think. Let me pull it up real quick. It first appeared on a different sub, High Strangeness. And then I asked him to post it to our sub, which he did, and now it's at almost 3K upvotes. Posted by, here, I'll just share my screen real quick. Posted 1 day ago.
So November.
There's a very short clip.
Oh, yeah.
Of, a delta-shaped craft flying overhead. And he said he was just laying on his back and saw this thing flying over, started holding the photo button to start a video recording because he was so underprepared to record it. Got a couple seconds of it, and he's been stoked about it ever since. Yeah.
Initial thoughts, what do you think? Legit UFO?
Yeah, I mean, my inclination is to say that it's too fast and too regular to be, a flock of migrating birds or something. I mean, I'm not ruling it out, but I would just say it's a UAP for now. I like it. And that's the thing, like, um, in my opinion, for the most part, good sightings posts are very limited. They don't look like, you know, like many minutes of recording an object, because it's probably a kite or a star or something like that. It's brief, limited info, not great quality recording. Oftentimes to me, those are legit looking posts, even if there's really nothing to investigate.
I would have to agree because maybe they watched it without their phone, finally got their phone, and we get a little clip of it. Or I would say that if the clip is short and follows your parameters, it has a tendency more likely to be something I would consider an actual UAP.
Awesome. Stinger, what's your favorite?
My favorite post this month was not a single post, but a series of posts that different people put out as they dug into the National Archives. Some, of course, the National Archives moved the goalpost and changed the deadline because I don't know, maybe they read the language of the UAP Disclosure Act last year a little differently. And review, organize, and collect doesn't necessarily mean publish. So they now have a rolling basis to publish these things through next year. But nonetheless, some stuff was published, and some stuff is now there's bulk records downloads on the National Archives website, including all the files from Project Blue Book and stuff like that. And people have just been deep diving into these documents and finding all sorts of interesting stuff and making connections, and even looking into the documents of other countries' national archives, like Australia and the UK. I think there's a lot of fertile ground for research looking at these National Archives documents, and I really like that users have dug into them and done some really good posts. Pyro Spy has done some really good posts.
Are there any particular pictures or anything that stood out to you? I liked his one of like some radar tracks, I believe. Unless I'm misremembering that.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone's in particular off the top of my head. But I also want to take a moment to step up on my little UFO soapbox and talk
Yes.
about what I think when it comes to a couple questions that get asked a lot. One is about the origins of UAP, and the other is about the intentions of UAP. And I kind of have the same answer for both of these, and I'll get to that in the end. But basically, there's a number of diagrams that people have done of taxonomies of all of the possible explanations for UAP, from prosaic to extraterrestrial to interdimensional to cryptoterrestrial. You know, do they come from the oceans? Do they come from space? Do they come from the military? Are some of them misidentifications? I think that the vast variety in the descriptions of UFO craft, they're not all flying saucers. They're rods, they're spheres, they're triangles. Some are said to shapeshift. I think that the vast variety in the types of craft indicates that it's not just one answer. It's probably like a D, all of the above. And when people ask about the intentions of UAP, are they a national security threat? Are they positive? Are they negative? Are they neutral? And this gets in a little more into our aliens territory, but when people describe the occupants of the craft that have been seen at sightings, they're not all grays. There's a vast variety in the descriptions of the occupants of these craft over the humanoid encounters of many years. And so, again, I think it's because of the vast variety in the descriptions of the craft and the vast variety in the descriptions of the occupants, I think it's probably a D, all of the above situation, where it's not one size fits all. They're not all grays, they're not all saucers, and they're not all malicious, and they're not all Nordics, and they're not all benevolent. and they're not all, there's just a variety. There's just a variety. And I think there's probably different groups with different intentions from different places. Some are military, some come from the oceans, and some come from outer space.
Definitely a variety to choose from, and each one with their own rabbit hole.
It also reminds me of, in order to understand threat or to calculate it, you do need to know intent, right? It's capability and intent. I think that gets thrown around sometimes in the defense world, at least I've heard.
One aspect that we haven't talked about yet is that Carl Nell and Tim Galladay have had sort of this spiritual turn on craft and on UAP. Carl Nell saying, describe yourself to whatever religious framework you have to help you deal with whatever you're dealing with. And so that the SALT conference, again, a business conference, and I believe you repeated that again in the Global Disclosure Day, which, since I just mentioned that, if you wouldn't mind me, Stinger, just
No, go ahead.
going
I
over
was
my
done.
bonus.
Yeah.
My bonus post being the one that I posted and pinned. Global Disclosure Day. I know a lot of our readers were a bit upset that something actually wasn't disclosed. That wasn't really the purpose of that post and that movement. It was really to highlight that there's movement across the world to get this done, to have people that are in high places, people with resources, people with other teams in different areas of the world. Like it was pretty profound to see how many, you had Brazil, I believe, represented, and people over in Europe represented, and it was pretty phenomenal, in my opinion, as somebody that's been, a UFO light my whole life until recently this past year. Uh, I imagine for the UFO community as well, that's something that we should celebrate and something that we should hope for, and kind of grassroots campaign for to help. And I don't mean money wise. I mean just spreading the word that it exists to hopefully next year actually have the disclosure stuff that you want to see, as we see 300 more days being lived on, as Sheehan has, um, with us seeing Carl Nell make his statement and other people behind this movement. I think that speaks a lot to the validity of what we pinned there. So that was my favorite post. I hate that there wasn't anything new that was said, but at least you could see that there's a big movement to help get things to be said. Dueling, any thoughts on your favorite post?
I had a favorite post, and it had to do with the Yukon post. There was a video found from a while back, and then the object kind of looked like the same shape, some kind of crescent. That one is pretty interesting. It's nice when these older videos kind of get uncovered that I have not seen before, and it kind of feels exciting, especially when the objects have some kind of anomalous movement. Of course, I haven't seen crazy right angle turns in some of these videos, but just seeing an object that definitely is rotating or at least guiding itself, it's interesting. It kind of makes my jaw drop. So there was a couple of those. Nothing out in particular stood out, but I'm kind of a fan of the older posts that I just hadn't come across my radar before. I just enjoy mostly reading everyone else's investigation work.
We have a wonderful community for that, and we appreciate our readers. And with that, I kind of want to say there have been a couple of subreddit rule updates. We encourage all of our readers to review and re-review the sidebar, where you can also click to read a lot of detailed information regarding how we moderate, the moderation logs, so that you could see what we do every day. Every single action is available and publicly available for anybody to analyze and view. We do encourage listeners to share their experiences. If you have any questions or concerns about what we've talked about today, please feel free, send us a mod mail. We review every single mod mail that is sent to us. It is posted not only to our inbox, it is then we have a rule on our Discord to post anything to our sub. It gets posted there. We have somebody and many individuals that review our inbox all the time, so nothing goes missed. Please reach out with any questions or concerns that you have about this podcast. And with that, we thank you for listening, and we hope that you subscribe to this podcast and listen to other ones in the future. Thank you all so much.